would stop updating on me there. Go ahead and call this City Council Budget and Finance meeting for Thursday, May 19th to order. And we have two items on the agenda tonight. We have the director's report, as well as we have Lieutenant Lehman's going to give us a presentation on the traffic safety grant that the PD has received. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Director Vaughn. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Budget Chair French. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I just want to confirm that you guys can see the dashboard. That's correct. Okay, just making sure.
Just a general reminder, if everybody mute yourselves, please, if you're not speaking. That would be quite helpful for feedback purposes.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and walk through this. So this is the April 30th budget monitoring dashboard, and the operating departments, as we walk through, pretty much every department is operating within the green, meaning within the allocated budget for the biennium. And walking down to the lakefront property, this is the Strategic Opportunity Fund, and this was a one-time purchase, so this doesn't really fit the operating, quote unquote. So it will be over budget, but that is pretty much, that purchase is done, and it was a one-time, and so that is going to be a little bit higher. On the legal side, we definitely have been using more legal over the last couple of years due to just the events that have been going on with CARES, ARPA, Sound Transit. There has just been quite a bit that has occurred recently. And so on the next budget amendment, we've got a couple things that need to come forward. We will probably be, in addition, truing up the legal budget. Walking down the municipal court services and continuing down, everything is operating within what we would define as the green or on target. So continuing, the audit, that is still operating within 42%. I do just want to put a placement reminder on this, that currently we did carry over, and we did have a certain allocated budget for 2 years. And at the beginning of 2021, we were still finishing the previous, I think it actually was 2019, because we are in 2020's audit currently, that budget did allocate over into 2021. And so we made a decision back in 2021 to just let this budget ride and see, but I want to bring it up now that we may have to expand the audit budget a little bit, because we may have to do that before the fiscal year end of 2022, and I don't want that to come as a surprise down the road. Community programs were at 52%, elections were at 46%. I did see that we just received another invoice, so in May's, that will be significantly different, and we do only receive that invoice once a year, so that will change next month. The emergency management, we are a little over on that, but that was where we were allocating and charging some of the ARPA stuff. Going down to memberships is the 71%. These are typically one-time purchases. They don't follow the operating the way that some of the other departments do. So it doesn't concern me that this will not follow that same principle. Walking over to the revenue by fund, the ARPA Fiscal Recovery Fund, we have received the first tranche of that revenue. Going down to the Capital Improvement Fund, this is the REIT 1, that is coming in strong. The general fund revenue is coming in above target, and then the sewer utility revenue, that is coming in a little bit below, but we do bill an invoice every 2 months, and so there's sometimes on certain months there's a little bit of a lag, but I do want to tie that back to the expenditures, which are also at 63%. So that is something we monitor. So not just the revenues, but tying it back to the expenditures. In addition, I want to remind everybody that during COVID, the city did not collect any form of late fees, and that is part of it. So going down to the street fund, that is coming in at 53%. Oops, I didn't mean to scroll down that far, but I do want to tie it back to the expenditures on the street fund. So the street fund maintenance, the street fund operations, those two are underneath that, the 53%, which is the revenue. The surface water utility revenue, this is tied with the with our property taxes, and so this will fluctuate. I'm guessing this will anticipating that within May this will significantly increase. And then going down to the transportation capital, I want to remind everybody that there is a lot of grant revenue within the transportation capital, basically tied to the roundabout, being from a state grant and a transportation improvement board TIB grant. So that is tracking low, but it's because oh my goodness, those two grants are based on a reimbursement. So until we expend those funds, we will not receive the revenue. And I'm going to scroll. Budget Chair, would you like me to pause for questions or just keep going?
I would like you to pause if you don't mind, Lindsay. Thank you so much. It's a lot to digest. Things are tracking as we would expect, but colleagues, did you have questions for Director Vaughn? Councilmember Lebo, please.
Thank you. Director Vaughn, could you explain a little more about the street fund revenue and then the street operations and street maintenance? Are we not expending on the street operations and maintenance as planned, and that's why it's running? Or is it you're anticipating a larger expenditure later in the year? And then on the street fund revenue, what do you see as the reasons why it's running under the anticipated?
So there's quite a few questions there. So one at a time, and then I might have to circle back to make sure that I answer everything. So within the street fund revenue, right-of-way permits are one of the main driving forces, and those just aren't coming in as was budgeted, to be entirely honest on that front. So that's tied to a little bit of construction and right-of-way permits. On the expenditure side, it is just they are tracking a little bit lower. Some of it we do have to enter in some larger amounts for. We were previously only budgeting a very small amount for our street, for the sand and snow plowing, and we did over the last couple years have learned a very valuable lesson that we do need to budget that at a little bit of a higher rate. And so going into this budget, we were more aware that we needed to have that at a higher number than we had previously been entering. Therefore, there's a little bit more of a budget allocation there. I might have to circle back with you on the expenditure portion of your question after touching base with the Public Works Director on the street maintenance and operations. My understanding is that we are not anticipating some large unanticipated expense there. However, before I say that with confidence, I would definitely want to circle back, as this is one of his funds.
Okay, thank you.
Did that answer all of your questions?
Yes, I look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Colleagues, any additional questions for Director Vaughn? Okay, hearing no questions. Thank you, Lindsay. Please continue.
Okay, I just am writing a quick note. Thank you.
Oh, you bet. Take your time.
To follow up. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down to the capital side, and actually I was just having, during my internal meeting with the Public Works Director, the first one, the capital or the culvert replacement for L80 and 90, this is the only, and the reason why that there is that the asterisk is because we did enter, I believe it was $3.9 million for construction. It was the only one that we plugged grant depending. The request has come forward that we remove that dollar amount of the 3.9 and only show the design. And my request back in that conversation was to take a time out on that and have the conversation here at Budget and Finance of if council feels that it's appropriate to remove that $3.9 million that we put in the budget very clearly with an asterisk that it was grant dependent on construction and would not move forward without those funds. If council feels, if this committee, budget committee and council feels that it is appropriate, we can remove that. I just wanted to make sure that decision was made together because it will be a large shift in the budget number that we are showing. But currently, the city is only anticipating and completing design because we have not been awarded a grant for this culvert replacement.
Okay, thank you, Director Vaughn. Colleagues, thoughts about the request to remove the delineation of the $3.9 million from the capital program here with the asterisks and that is grant dependent. Councilmember Riddle.
I'm not sure I want to see it go away, but I think it's useful to know what our orange is truly tracking against. You know, what is our current budget that we're trying to, or current costs that we're budgeting against there. So I'm not sure I want it to go away completely. I wouldn't mind if it was somehow like a different item. One was culvert design, one's culvert construction, so we can track how we're going through design. I've asked kind of for a similar sort of thing. I mean, for me, coming from an architecture and construction background, the process of going through a design is very different than the process going through construction. Oftentimes they're different contracts with different entities. So it's kind of nice to actually be able to track those two separately, especially if we don't have funds for one part of it. Mm-hmm. So I would like to see them separated. I'm not 100% sure I'd like to see one just completely disappear though. If that makes sense.
Councilmember Goldman.
Yes, thank you. So I was hoping for a bit of clarification about the grant. So you had said that the grant has not been approved. Does that mean that the grant application is still pending or that the grant application has been rejected?
No, the grant, this was dependent when we built the budget. We put it in as grant dependent for construction with noting that the funds, the city did not have the funds. So it was a hopeful, we were hopeful that the city would receive some grant funding for that. And that has not materialized to date. So that being said, it's not a grant that the city has in hand. And I am going to let City Administrator Hill finish.
Thank you, Director Vaughn. And Mr. Hill, I should have actually had you speak in advance of anyone else, just for your perspective and the administration's perspective as well.
No, that's all right. No, so Councilmember Goldman, we've pursued a couple different avenues. We've pursued grants, we've pursued direct allocations from the state legislature as well as at the federal level. And so it's kind of a misnomer to say that it was reliant on grant dollars, because at any point in time, we may have had, three irons in the fire, so to speak. So we continue to pursue those dollars But so far have been unsuccessful on all of those fronts. And to Councilmember Riddle's point, we don't want to forget about what this is going to cost us. And we do feel that we should track both of these, design and construction, but separately so that it tells the true story. And to just to back up a little bit, and Councilmember Lebo in the past has asked for a little bit more of a quick snapshot dashboard of individual projects. We're working on putting that together right now, and that's coming along fairly well, so that you can just look at a project, whether it's in design or construction. You can see target dates are being met, percent spend. And so we want to give you a little more detail than this bar graph tells you and break things out, design versus construction. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. I think that was more like $3.9 million, but we appreciate
Wish
that.
I had it for you.
We all do. Vice Chair Cassover.
Sorry, I forgot about the unmuting. Yeah, thanks. This is a good discussion. Having had to prepare these kinds of reports in my past life that dealt with unfunded projects, I just would recommend that some color coding could be very useful here, and that projects that are relying on anticipated funding of one kind or another be actually shown in a different color than those that are funded with city money. There's a saying that we had in my old life called the color of money. Was it our money? Was it somebody else's money? Was it money we didn't have yet? And I really do think that some color coding could be quite helpful here, and would be glad to sit and think about it with somebody at another time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lebo.
Thank you. I have similar thoughts. And so just in looking at this, if we anticipate getting revenue during the biennium, then I think it would be appropriate to budget it. But as Councilmember Cassover spoke, the color of money. So for example, I would anticipate that the dark blue represents funds in hand, and that maybe everything above that 200,000 or whatever it is shown as some other color of push, or a very light gray or poche of something that clearly indicates that that is the unfunded portion. But I think it's appropriate that if we anticipate getting revenue in a biennium, that we recognize it. But we also recognize that we don't have it in hand.
Thank you, Mr. Lebo. And I would just chime in with my 3.9 million cents that I would agree with my colleagues. I think that the visibility, I think, is really important here. If we can break it out in a way that continues to track that, these are the funds that we need. These are the funds that we actually have, and this is what has been expended. I think I think that's reasonable, and I do believe that it's very important for us for clarity for the community as well, to show what we have received as well, because we've been extraordinarily successful in many capital projects in receiving grant funds. And so that's something that's critical. And it also kind of lights the fire under the rest of us to kind of think outside the box to make sure that if we hear out there in the political world that there's opportunities for additional grant opportunities, that we can relay that information to the stakeholders amongst the staff, that they can address those considerations post haste, so to speak. Does that resonate with all of you folks? I see thumbs ups, heads nods. Okay, great, thank you. Director Vaughn, does that give you, and Phil, does that give you something to work with? Okay, great. Awesome, thank you. And I fully recognize too that these kind of charts, particularly when we're virtual, or sometimes it's difficult to delineate everything. And sometimes visually we're going to have to break some things out into some larger kinds of vehicles, if you will, to help illustrate things for the deeper dives, but not necessarily all the time. Okay, Director Vaughn, thank you for that.
Yeah, and I just want to put a little caveat in there that we will work on this report and see what we can do. And I wrote down all of the notes, and we'll see how we can manipulate the Tableau report that we have to reflect the desire and that's being requested. So moving along, the Animal Acres Picnic Shelter, that's completed. The asphalt overlay, that is the 2021 is completed, and then we have submitted everything for 2022, and that will be hopefully later this summer. And then the Beach Drive lift station, we just had a conversation about that has, the budget was put in here to be started in 2022, and per some recent discussions, we're not sure if that project will start in 2022 or if it will wait until a future date. Going on to L60, that has been completed. The facilities projects, you will soon start seeing a bit of a burn rate on that with some of the improvements that you have recently seen in City Hall, within City Hall. So next month, I anticipate that there will be some change and some actual orange on that one. And then going on to the next couple, the city has not started any of those projects. The pedestrian crossing, that's just following up a little bit more. And then the Safe Streets project, and that is kind of an ongoing, that's an ongoing one. So I'm gonna go ahead and walk down to the next, oh, excuse me. Sorry about that.
Councilmember Lebo, did you have a question on?
Yeah, thank you. Should we include the Northeast 35th stormwater project? Because that's, I think the last estimate I heard was about $1 million, which would be a little blip on this.
That would. And we could,
I
I know that we only have so much room on this report, but I think some projects that we know aren't going to happen this year, we'll remove those, and we can have a discussion about that. You know, if we don't think that Beach Drive or Hillside Creek or the material bin are going to happen this year, we could report back that we removed those because they aren't going to happen, and start reporting on stuff that we know is moving forward this year.
Okay, thank you.
If you didn't have anything else, Councilmember Lebo, I wanted to bring up something that you brought up at our last meeting, and I don't think Lindsay was here for that, nor did I communicate that to her, but we need to step back and have discussions about the questions you asked last time about Animal Acres Park, and the culvert is, you know, did we have savings? Does this show the full spend out? And so we need to answer that question for you. I forgot to relay that to her. So we'll get you the answers on those.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Lindsay, please continue.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and scroll down to the revenue by line item. And again, on the back side of the report, on the front side, you're seeing all of the visual. On the back side, you're seeing all the numbers that populate that visual and the percentages. So I just, we're not going over all of this because we already have on the front page. I just wanna make a note of that. So then walking down to the revenue by line item, business tax is coming in at 72%. Construction permits, and I'm going to kind of lump construction permits and mechanical and plumbing permits all within the same. Construction is coming in a little bit slower than anticipated due to just the market changes and what's been going on with the economy, and that it's hard to get materials and whatnot. And contractors are definitely pretty far out to have anything completed. So those are some driving factors within it. Going down to the gas tax, that is at 61%. That's when we pulled out to kind of monitor as during COVID and the working from home, and people weren't actually driving nearly as much. And that is tracking a little bit lower than on the revenue side. Going down to passports, we did just all of 2021, we did not, or at the end of 2021, we started bringing that in. That we've changed the format on. It's appointment only. So that is happening for an appointment only and on weekends, on Saturdays. And then moving down to the real estate excise tax 1 and 2, that is coming in at 74%. It's strong, and still communicating with my utility billing analyst. She continues to say that escrows are still coming in strong. Going down to the sales and use tax, that in addition, that revenue source is coming in strong. And then on even with the additional expansion that we added for the budget amendment, and then the traffic safety camera revenue, that in addition is coming in at 90%. And that concludes my overview of that. Are there any questions on the individual line items?
Director Vaughn, it just occurred to me that because we've been in uncertain times here for 26 months, it might be useful, with the magic of Tableau, because it's such a wonderful system, that in terms of revenue by line item, if we could look at basically sort of a historical graph of where this has gone. And again, this is not like a burning fire, but it's sort of something that would help us kind of think about where we're going, where we've been, and what we need to think about relative to the future. And I don't know what the time frame is, and we can talk about this offline, but it's been so difficult to anticipate where things are going. We expected sales and use tax to plummet, and then because of shared sales tax, we've done okay. And there's been about other places too where things have tracked lower. So I just a suggestion that if we might be able to pull up a quick report of that in the future to see it over a period of time, maybe over, I don't want to make this too complicated, but over 6 months pre-pandemic and to current might be useful for us in the future, for us to take a look at, because I have concerns that the recent economic data is showing strange trends that we're again not being able to kind of anticipate. And I think that as we go into the budget season, I want to make sure that everyone is informed about potential challenges coming down around the horn here. So Mr. Hill, please, you had your hand up.
Thanks. I just wanted to give a little bit of an update and context to the passports. So we started those in June of last year again. You remember we started with one passport agent, tried to figure out the wait while app that we use, kind of the time constraints, as well as the space constraints in City Hall. And I think we're up to at least 3 passport agents on Saturdays. But Matt was just mentioning today that we're reducing the time with each individual. We're making the appointments only 15 minutes long, and that's a benefit of having it appointment only, and you have to be ready when you show up for your appointment. They're finding that a half an hour is just too long to spend. He said that if it's one person, they're taking 5 to 10 minutes with them is all. So we're becoming more efficient in figuring out what this looks like, coming out of COVID. So those numbers should start to climb back up. And this, I think, this year is our first full year that we'll get to see revenue for an entire 12 months of a calendar year. So things are changing, things are evolving, and starting to, it should start to change that.
Thank you, Mr. Hill, Administrator Hill. Yeah, from my personal experience, 3 of us, my family went in, we were in and out in, I think, less than 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. It was quite, and that was last fall. It was quite expeditious. Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. I like the idea of kind of that historical context. I'm wondering if how frequent we would need to see that kind of data. Chair, did you have a thought? Are you thinking quarterly? Are you thinking, I don't know, when would that be useful data for us? I just feel like maybe every month is not as useful as maybe a bigger time frame between them.
I agree. I don't think it needs to be onerous in the context of a time frame of like every meeting or anything else like that. I'm thinking if we I think the first one, it will probably kind of, the first time we get that data, say I'm trying to think maybe a 3-year horizon up till now. Something like that gives us a little bit of kind of context, maybe a little bit less than that, depending on what. And Tableau can spit it out fairly readily. It just takes a little bit of time to put together the parameters and input them. But I don't believe it needs to be on a meeting by meeting basis. I think it would be useful for us to maybe just have at least an initial snapshot, and then potentially late summer, as we begin to really contemplate the budget and we see where things are tracking. That would be, and maybe this is enough for us, at that point, after we've had the historical kind of look at where we've been and see where the economy goes.
Thank you.
Let's see, colleagues, any other questions right now? I apologize, Director Vaughn, please continue.
May I ask just a quick clarifying question? Is the interest to see a historical graph on all of the revenue by line items? Because I do want to remind that these are just the ones that we kind of cherry picked, as you might say, that we were monitoring for good or for cautionary reasons. And so I do want to remind that we adopt city budgets, revenue and expenditure at the fund level, but these are just specifically pulled out to be monitored on a little bit more of an individual basis. Is the desire to see the historical on just these line items or the funds?
Just from my perspective, and colleagues, I certainly welcome your thoughts here. From my perspective, when we very specifically in conversations with council member and then Chair Risha, pulled these specifically out as sort of a snapshot of where our revenues are going to make sure that we're not in challenging circumstances based upon the way the economy was going or not going, for that matter, at that time. So to answer your question, from my perspective, Director Vaughn, I don't want to reinvent the wheel here. I'm thinking these are very specific KPIs, key performance indicators that gives us a holistic view. And then if we see something that's alarming, as a side note, we can dig into where, on a fund level basis. But beyond that, unless somebody has I don't want to overburden your team. So unless somebody has a very specific request, I think I'm comfortable with this group.
Thank you for the clarification. And then I just, that actually concludes my overview of the report. And then just want to point out that each individual, all of the numbers are financially shown on the back that are presented in graphs or the bar charts on the front. And that
Councilmember Riddle, did you have a question? I saw your hand come up and then.
No, it's okay. I was just thinking it would be useful maybe to see the fund level sort of just as a historical context especially for some of the newer council members, that just maybe once, just to understand it. It's also, as Dr. Vaughn has been sharing with us, this has a peak at the beginning because all of the, invoices for that, it's a one-time invoice happens at the beginning. And so kind of being able to see that cadence and see where we're flowing through that cadence, especially if it's not a consistent operating budget with a consistent growth every month, that would be kind of useful for me, I think, and possibly for others. I don't think we need it on a regular basis, but annually would be kind of an interesting to see how we compare to the last 1 or 2 years in the whole cadence.
Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Director Vaughn, maybe I just missed it, but when you look at the overall revenue and the overall expenditures, what does it look like?
That is meaning by fund. I'm sorry.
No, I just mean the overall city budget. When you look at the city budget, for example, we're underrunning on passport revenue by anticipated revenue, and we're running over on retail real estate excise tax and traffic cameras. So when you look at our total budget, revenue, and anticipated expenditures, are we anticipating that for the biennium we're going to be above or below? I mean, looking at this in a gross level, it looks like we're going to be fine. But what does that look like?
That is not, I'm not prepared to speak on that right at the exact moment, but I definitely can look at that as a whole and report back. Absolutely.
Because it would be useful. I mean, this is great information and I love it. I love the financial stuff. But it's sort of like, this is at 10,000 feet, and at 5,000 feet, you're diving even deeper. But at 30,000 feet, how are we doing as a city? When you look at the overall budget and revenue and expenditures. So I'd be curious.
You're asking for the operating, basically the operating side of the revenue coming in versus the operating side of the expenditures going out.
Well, it would also be, I mean, I think in terms of cities have both operating and capital budgets. And on both sides, they have revenue and expenditures. So what does the overall picture look like?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Lebo.
Thank you.
Colleagues, excuse me, other questions? Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. Okay, I think that will cover that unless Administrator Hill or Director Vaughn have any additional comments or thoughts. Thank you very much, Director Vaughn. This has been very helpful. And as Mr. Hill indicated, whoa, I suddenly have a big face here. As Mr. Hill indicated, that the staff is working on a CIP report. And I spoke with Director Perigo yesterday about, he was asking some, what some of our specific requests were regarding that, and some thoughts about how there's some visibility, that we can create some visibility about those various projects in the report. So we'll be getting together with the administration, with Director Vaughn. I'll be getting together with Director Vaughn, Administrator Hill, and Director Perigo probably early next week, to talk about how we can make sure that there are methods that make sense to everybody for that understanding, if you will. People learn differently. I certainly do. Mr. Furtani, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Chair.
Please.
And this is just because, I now know how my students feel when they say, this is going to sound like a stupid question, but let me put it this way. This is going to sound like a stupid question. But on the L60 line item, this just bugs me because it shows a budget of 460,000 and an expenditure of 100 and something. And my point is that if that project is done, why aren't those two numbers the same?
Director Vaughn?
Because that's a budget number versus an actual expenditure number.
Okay.
So it's what was allocated for a budget, and in capital projects, this is the ideal situation that you would like to see. I'll probably end it with that. And sometimes we are not as fortunate, and it does end up going the other direction where you end up expending a little bit more. That's always not the anticipated goal, but sometimes coming from construction prior to coming into government, that can be the way that it does go sometimes on certain.
So there's no 200,000 sitting around someplace that wasn't spent then. Right. Okay. That was.
So thank you, Director Vaughn. I mean, excellent answer. And I think your question, Mr. Furtani, is a very good one. I mean, the challenge, of course, and I'm certainly no expert on this, and Mr. Lebo certainly has a lot of experience in this regard, but the budgeted amounts, what actually comes in, the actual versus the actual, the budgeted amount, the precise budgeted amount, most times, unfortunately, it comes in, close, or sometimes it's a little bit higher. And that's when it's not very much fun. When it's lower, that's one of those moments when we can go, yay, that's good. We've had a couple of those recently, the picnic shelter, some other projects that came in under budget, and it's always pleasant to have to see that when the actuals come in, it's all reconciled, and there's it's less expensive than was anticipated. Anyway, I'll leave it there. There's a lot of nuances there that go into the budgeting for this, and I'll leave that to the experts. Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you, Chair. Remind me, am I correct in stating that this budget is just this biennium's amount if a project were to be over more than just this biennium, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So
we aren't
but
seeing the total cost. We're not seeing the contract cost of the whole project. We're just simply seeing the budgeted for the 21-22 biennium.
I actually may want to step back and correct what I just stated, because we do, when contracts come forward and they are adopted, that is the amount that's put into the budget. And although our city budget is a 2-year budget, if one of these projects that was adopted would go moved into 2023, then that budget per RCW, and I don't know the quoted RCW to name right this second, naturally, but that budget does carry forward. So if council has approved a contract, then that contract stands for that capital project, and then it does carry forward into the next fiscal year.
Does the budget number, though, listed under capital, because I'm looking at the Animal Acres picnic shelter with 138,000 budgeted, but it was more than that. We're not seeing the total cost, are we?
You're seeing I'm sorry, you're seeing the carryover.
It's okay. Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying.
Is that so it was in the 1920, and now the Animal Acres, the remaining budget is per that RCW is what carried over into the 21-22, which is now what you're seeing on this report.
And so that's an actual budget remaining based off of the actual money spent in the prior biennium. And then it just carries over what is remaining, and then we work towards that in this year's biennium. As I understand it, right? There's no magic numbers happening. It's just straight carryover. Okay.
Correct. If we're just going to use very round numbers here. If a project was $200,000 and you allocated you allocated that $200,000 and you only spent $100,000, that additional $100,000 would then be allocated in the next budget, because that contract of $200,000, in order to allow that budget to be there for the expenditure, since the council had already approved that contract and that in order to be completed. Because even though it might not follow perfectly on a fiscal years or budget cycles, the project can't just stop because we ended on 12.
Oh no, I understand that. Nowhere here does it actually tell us what that original total project cost budget, which is I think where Councilmember Lebo was wondering, like, what's our project dashboard, because we lose that context across the biennium. And so I think that's definitely something to be speaking towards, getting some sort of project dashboard for these larger significant capital projects. Because you look at, again, the savings, we're excited about these savings, but how much savings percentage wise of that budget is it really? I mean, dollars are great, don't get me wrong, but it's just kind of nice to have that context. If we're truly done with Animal Acres picnic shelter, the savings there of $57,000 sounds great if the original budget was $138,000, but we know that it's not the total project cost that we're seeing there. Anyways, thank you for clarifying and letting me.
I understand what you're saying, and yes, now I see it from a different perspective in addition.
Vice Chair Cassover, you have a question?
Well, thank you. I mean, it was a clarifying question, but as I listened to my colleague, Councilmember Riddle ask hers, I think maybe we're cleared up now. And I would agree that we as a council need a little bit different of a view, I think, that is more that 100,000 foot view, so that we have a real grasp of how the city is doing, what the city is accomplishing, and not quite so much what the budget is, what the expenditures are for this particular budget cycle, because that doesn't actually paint the picture for us. We need the whole picture, not the little piece slice of the picture that the budget report, you know, tends to give us. So I just would like to support Councilmember Riddle's ideas there and say that I think we need two reports. I think we need a report on the budget, but I also think we need a report that looks at the projects across their whole life cycle, not just the current budget cycle.
Thank you. Great. I'm sorry, Director Vaughn.
I was just going to state that I was going to give City Administrator Hill some credit here, saying that he has been working on, I think, just exactly what you're asking for. It's unfortunately, some of this stuff is just more of a little bit of a work in progress, but I think I definitely want to make note that that the council is being heard on their requests.
Thank you, Director Vaughn. And I think a couple of things that you said, Vice Chair Cassover. One, that the 100,000 foot view is really important for us to kind of holistically take a look at what's going on. And I think too, the question of, and for lack of a, I wouldn't say lack of a better term, there are better terms in this, but in my world, we talk about our burn down rate, where things are budgeted and where we actually are. And in terms of both resources and dollars. And sometimes it's difficult to take a snapshot in time like this is and just kind of wrap your brain around it. If I liken it to sort of looking at this down on the ground and suddenly getting pulled up and trying to think at that level of that, way up in the stratosphere level, it is challenging. And so I think this is a great conversation, and it will definitely inform our discussions next week about how to kind of create visuals or a dashboard that will, and again, being cognizant of staff's time and everything regarding that, trying to find different ways to visualize this and communicate it so that we can have these robust conversations about the items. Yes, Vice Chair Castro.
If I could,
please.
Thank you for those comments, Chair French. But if I could just kind of add to that as a council, we have two roles, it seems to me. One is to hold, one is this sort of accountability role that we engage in when we look at the dashboard. But the other is the strategic and policy role, where we need to look across the whole city and understand how we're allocating resources and whether it's the right thing. And we get to do some of that during the budget season. And I think that some of our new council members will start to get to feel more comfortable, as we go through that, because then we are really talking about strategic priorities and how that budget matches them. But it's a little bit hard, I mean, I don't want to be unfair here to our budget and finance and the administration in general, because we do get into that during the budget season. But I think that the frustration that, is being exhibited here is a little bit because we're kind of in the middle of it, rather than starting with that nice big picture of what our other job is, which is to think about strategic direction and policy.
Thank you. Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you. I think this is a really good discussion. And one of the things that as we look at that sort of strategic is to understand, if we think about the dashboard as a cash flow, meaning how much cash have we received to date, how much cash have we expended, that's a great picture. It's sort of like balancing your checkbook. But you also have a yearly plan for your household. And we know that, for example, escrow payments go out twice a year. And so your insurance goes out twice a year. And so you budget for those big hits. And so you may be cash rich this month only because you haven't paid your insurance. And so you want to be very cognizant of what is my forecast? Where am I going to end up at the end of the year, or where am I going to end up at the end of the biennium? And that also applies to the capital projects. So as you think about the larger dashboard, think in terms of what are we forecasting? So you forecast revenue and you forecast expenditures, and is it red or is it black? And one of the challenges on the capital side is that there's a reluctance to forecast. Oftentimes you will see if my budget is $1 million, my forecast is $1 million. And the reality of that is, well, that's not really true. I'm just not showing you what I'm forecasting. It may be 950,000 or it might be 1,050,000, but just for convenience, I show $1 million. So I encourage to show a forecast that represents what you think it's going to be, whether it's on the operating side or on the capital side. And so to Councilmember Cassover, it's that strategic view that we're looking for. Are we running behind or ahead this year? And if we're running ahead, meaning there might be additional revenue, that helps us think about what are our priorities, either for the remaining of the biennium or for the next biennium. So
Great thoughts.
I look forward to the reports.
Thank you, John. And colleagues, I bookmarked here, I made a note too as well, that it occurred to me that this is one of those places I think all of us want to leave, when we eventually leave our roles and with helping the community out, leaving in a better place than where we started. And one of those things that I think that we have not done a whole lot of is training in regards to things like this. And I made a note of, capital budgeting training too, because I think there's some foundational, pun intended, CIP, parenthetically CIP, knowledge that would be useful for everybody to be on the same page about relative to that, so that those of us who have financial and budgeting experience from the past, large budgets, or even small budgets, other folks don't have necessarily those experiences. And I think it'd be instructive for us to, and so I'll do some poking around and see if we can find relative to some additional training to help all of us and refresh those of us who have been doing it a bit as well. Okay, great conversation. I think this is helping me a lot, and I hope it's instructive for everyone else as well. Director Vaughn, I think, was that the conclusion of what you had here? And
That is correct.
okay.
Okay. French.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's a lot. It's it's sort of like I don't know. It's sometimes with this group, which I think it's a very positive comment about my colleagues, is it feels like graduate level symposium discussions, and I really enjoy it. It's very thought provoking and keeps us on our toes. With that, we have a second item here, and I believe we have, is this Lieutenant Lehman's presentation or okay, thank you, Lieutenant Lehman. Oh, hi there. You're in the background. I couldn't see you there. That's on my list. So welcome,
I'm
Rhonda.
here now. Hi, everyone. I am going to share my screen and talk to you about much less exciting and less money, but I am going to show you about a grant we received. So Officer Fairholm applied for a traffic safety grant through the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, so we could acquire new LiDAR and radar equipment to assist our officers with traffic enforcement to provide a higher level of safety and service to the community. And we were awarded $14,400. This is to replace our aging radar and LiDAR equipment that is collectively 20 years old or more, and most of it is defective. The department has tried to budget unsuccessfully for units and has been unsuccessful in obtaining any other grants. Initially, we purchased 12 radar units and 2 LiDARs many years ago. Currently, we have 9 units and only 6 are functional. Both of our LiDARs have bad batteries and are only usable using the corded adapter. One LiDAR is not functional at all. They're all old technology and mostly failing. So we decided to get 8 new radar units for all the patrol vehicles. So moving radar would be operational in all of our patrol cars, and then 3 LiDAR units, which are handheld. The North Sound Police Foundation also donated to purchase these radar and LiDAR units, and the total cost was $25,637 and some change. And then, so that's the breakdown between the traffic safety grant and then the foundation donation. And the units are actually sitting outside my office and they're ready to be installed and calibrated within the next few weeks.
Outstanding.
So that's what I have there.
Colleagues, questions for Lieutenant Lehman?
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
great.
Yeah, Officer Fairholm did a good job. We've tried for years to get a grant and she went in there and got it for us. All right.
Riddle.
Quick question. What do you think was the reason that we were successful this time, and can we leverage that in the future?
So I wasn't involved in applying for this grant, but I think there was a lot more funding available at this point in time. And the grant was never for us to say, we have all these units, we just don't like them anymore, we want new ones. It was a replacement. And so we said, the majority of our equipment is bad and we don't have any equipment in anything other than 2 of our patrol cars. So they were more likely to give us money for new units that way.
Awesome. Thank you.
Vice Chair Cassover.
Well, thank you. I don't really have a question, Lieutenant Lehman, but I just would like you to pass on our congratulations to Officer Fairholm for getting this grant. And just to say that as a community member, I have been frankly shocked at some of the speeds that I'm seeing on not only our 2 state highways, but also on some of our neighborhood streets. And I am very hopeful that this new equipment will help to start retraining our drivers to actually obey the law and drive the proper speed. And the national statistics about crashes and traffic deaths are really very startling. And I think the pandemic has a lot to do with it, but this couldn't come at a better time. So thank everybody very much. And I hope you can quickly get them installed and calibrated and out on the roads.
Yeah, it'll be much easier for the officers to go out and enforce stuff when they have the equipment rather than just 1 or 2 at a time.
Councilmember Goldman.
Yes, thank you, and congratulations to the department for getting this grant. My question, I was hoping you could just briefly touch on, I guess, the radar devices versus LiDAR and when the officers would use each. And also with this new equipment, does it mean that every single patrol officer will have access to one of these when they're out on their regular patrol?
So the radar units are mounted in the vehicle and they can be used stationary or when the vehicle's moving. And then the LiDARs are handheld units, which is a laser type where you can pinpoint a single vehicle using a laser dot and put it on the license plate. And that's for stationary use only. You can't be moving around with it. And then each vehicle will have a moving radar installed inside of it. So every officer will have access to that every day they work. And then with the 3 LiDAR units, any officer can check that out and take it out at any time. So they could essentially have both.
Yep, that sounds very good. Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you. Lieutenant Lehman, well done in getting the grant. Well done in the department. Question for you, and Councilmember Cassover noted that we do have speeding in our streets, not just on our state highways, but in our residential areas. We do have some of those, I think for lack of a better word, your speed is
Mhm.
signs. Would we benefit from additional ones if the council found opportunities to budget for additional our speed signs? Are there things that you think would help us as a community to reduce some of the speeds that we see through our residential neighborhoods and on the state highways?
Well, I've been here almost 30 years now, and I know that when we focus on certain areas, the speed will slow down. We will get basically a reputation for being in those areas. What will happen with these more units is we'll be able to spread out among more areas. And if we spend more time in certain areas, that'll slow them down. So we go out to the main complaint areas first and work those, and then we can branch out. We have the committee that meets that looks at different areas and sees what signage would help, or flashing lights, or the speed signs. Like we put up on Ballinger, which has helped slow people down considerably before the curve there. So those are looked at on a case-by-case basis with an engineer and a group of us. So mostly what needs to happen is people need to send that in through the city, and then we'll review the different areas. But I think that if we go to the hardest hit areas where we get the most complaints, it'll make a big difference in short order.
Thank you. I
Councilman-
was just wondering if, for example, if we put up your speed signs and we find that those are effective, those are sort of passive means of reducing speed without having to use patrol officers. And so my question is there a benefit for us, as an example, to fund additional signs like that? It seems a bit odd to just rely on community requests to say we need this kind of thing, as opposed to looking holistically across our community.
They do help to a certain degree. There's always going to be the outliers that
Sure.
try and see how high they can get those signs up to. They certainly have made an impact in the areas where they're at. So it wouldn't hurt to look and see if it would be successful in other areas.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lebo. Yes, and on point, I was coming down Ballinger and noticed a cyclist clocked in with a slow down as he was riding his bike down the hill, which was kind of surprising. I think his tires are about to melt. Mr. Frottani.
That was me. No, I'm kidding. Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lieutenant Lehman, and please add my congratulations to Officer Fairholm for getting this grant. Just because basically we're going to be talking about speed limits at some point in the near future, what I'm wondering is, are these units capable of downloading their data to a centralized database, or are they kind of self-contained and they don't communicate with anything else?
No, they're self-contained. They're only for the moment, and then we note it. The signs that Councilmember Lebo is talking about, we can actually download the data from those.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Furtani. Councilmember Riddle.
Yeah, similar to my colleagues, I like those signs, and I do like that as you exceed it by a certain amount, it simply says slow down, so they can't, see if they can hit 60 on our neighborhoods, which is fantastic. That it takes that incentive away from certain drivers. But I like that it tracks the data. And I think having that in more neighborhoods will help us as policymakers understand what changes that we can support long-term, whether it be as we're talking about speed limits now, or whatever opportunities we have in the future, as we have more technology that can allow us to handle these sorts of things theoretically in the future. So I would also say, if you need more of those, would like some more of those, I think let's start having those discussions and see what we can do.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'll just throw in my 2 cents, and thank you, Lieutenant Lehman. I would like to also express my appreciation to your department and Officer Fairholm for finding this grant and receiving it. I know it takes a lot of time to write those grants and go through the process. I think that just echoing some of the sentiments of my colleagues here, sort of stay tuned to this channel. I think we're going to be having increased conversations or continuing conversations about public safety on our streets. And I know this body is fully committed to ensure that you're resourced as we go forward, that we're not going to create policies that it's going to overtly burden the department, but will help resource you folks appropriately to make sure that we can continue to increase the safety on our streets. We've observed, all of us anecdotally have observed crazy behaviors out there, and it's kind of alarming. And I think it's time for everybody to take a deep breath and be respectful of all the pedestrians, multimodal users, and the cars, and see where we can go. But thank you so much for your presentation. And colleagues, any last thoughts or questions for Lieutenant Lehman? All right, well, thank you very much, Rhonda, and thanks for all you do and your department, your efforts.
You're welcome. That's what we're here for.
Take care. Have a great evening.
All right, you too. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Okay, colleagues, we are at 7:06. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, and Director Vaughn and I knew it was going to be a little bit abbreviated meeting this evening. Is there anything else, Director Vaughn or Mr. Hill, that you wanted to bring to our attention?
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Hill.
No, I just said I don't think we do.
Oh,
So,
okay, thank you. With that, colleagues, just a general reminder that we have a meeting on Monday, and that will be in person, not virtual. And again, if you have a need to be virtual, that is certainly a prerogative, and staff has very kindly given you the opportunity to attend virtually if it's necessary. But otherwise, we'll see you in City Hall. And Councilmember Riddle.
2 questions. One, do we know where that is going to be? Are we
Yes.
going to try chambers again, or are we in another room?
We will use the council chambers. We'll have the table set up on the floor with one fixed camera, and then we'll also have the large screens TV set up as a whiteboard. If you want a whiteboard on that, save it to the system, and then we can send that file out to the entire council.
Thank you. And then just more of a administrative question or comment. I noticed in our agenda, we said that the council chambers are not yet open to the public. I think we may want to rethink the language around the virtual meetings.
Does that say that on the cow?
No, but it says it for this budget and finance. And it implies that it's like council just that it kind of implies City Hall's closed. I don't want people to get the wrong impression. It's just that we opted to do this virtually rather than hybrid.
Yeah, okay.
So just thinking about the language there, that's less confusing for the public who are looking at those, and other people who are looking at those agendas. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And with that, I'd like to move on to public comment and see if we have anybody that would like to make comment tonight at this budget and finance meeting. Please use the raise hand function, folks, if you would like to make comment to the group. Give it a moment here. Okay, looks like we don't have any public comment. And with that, I think we are adjourned. Thank you for a very robust conversation. And thank you, Director Vaughn, very much for all your assistance here tonight in answering our questions. And Mr. Hill, have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you. Take care.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks, Chair.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.